Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube, and welcome to, of course, another Friday review. And today, of course, I am reviewing the newest album from Hexx that is titled Entangled in Sin, which was released through High Roller Records on September 25th of this year. So, this, of course, was somewhat requested from Songwriting, which you can check that out, of course, on the Halloween special of the Nasty Metal podcast episode. That was a week ago or so, just this past Sunday anyways. Still, though, you can definitely can check that out on there, which again, but I was planning on reviewing this anyway, since, of course, again, 2017 was when I reviewed their comeback album, Wrath of the Reaper. So, anyways, I was still planning on reviewing this album anyways, and of course also, that's where we get into, of course, at least the lineup. It's pretty much, at least in many ways, I believe is still the same lineup for sure, of Hexx here. It's the same lineup since, of course, Wrath of the Reaper. Again, Eddie Vega is still on vocals here, who debuted on Wrath of the Reaper on that album. So, without further ado, again, one of the most, along with Vicious Rumors, definitely one of the early U.S. power metal bands to come out of San Francisco, which I believe I am correct there. Let's see if I am. Yes, I am completely correct. So therefore, let's get into, of course, my review for Entangled in Sin from Hexx. All right. So before I really get into any of my thoughts on the album, let's definitely do a track listing rundown. Which, of course, depending on which copy you got, if you have it on record or on CD, the track listing is going to be varied. On the regular vinyl copy of the album, again, the regular 12-inch record, there's at least 10 songs, and that all clocks in at 42 minutes and 32 seconds. However, if you had gotten the CD copy, you would have been given additional 3 bonus tracks, and that would have then been bumped up to about 55 minutes and 16 seconds. But for this review, I'm mostly focusing on just the original, again, just the straight up 12-inch track listing, just the straight up 10 songs, not really many bonus tracks. I might comment on some of them, but that's about it. So we're just focusing on the 10 songs here. So these 10 songs are, of course, Watching Me Burn, Entangled in Sin, which, of course, is the title track, Vultures Gather Round, Beautiful Lies, Power Mad, Infernal Enemy, Strive the Grave, Touch of the Creature, Wise to the Ways of the World, and Over But the Bleeding. Now, I guess if you want to know the bonus tracks, well, the 3 bonus tracks, of course, are Signal 30, Interstate 5, which I'll comment a little bit on that in the review here a little later. I'll try and comment on that. And, of course, the 2 re-recordings of Night of Pain and Terror. So there we go. There's at least the song listing rundown. Again, I might have had some trouble trying to, I guess it is Strive the Grave. That's kind of a little weird, and not a word I'm used to saying, or I'm at least familiar with. Alright, so here we go. As far as my thoughts on the album, I was very receptive towards Wrath of the Reaper. I know that there was a few people that seemed to not care for it. I mean, I once got a comment saying that the album sucked, which, I don't know, I didn't really think the album was that bad to begin with. Of course, there was at least some great response towards the album, but at the same time, there was also some people that definitely didn't think it was so good, and I've also some names I'm not going to mention on this channel to begin with. Still, though, it at least had a decent reception, very, very divisive, but not completely drastically different. It was positive for the most part. And so, for me, who of course was very positive towards Wrath of the Reaper, how were they able to follow up with Entangled in Sin? How was this album going to at least follow up to Wrath of the Reaper? How was Entangled in Sin going to be? That's what I'm trying to get at the point at. If you're not trying to understand that, that's the point I'm trying to get. Well, upon listening to this album, I do have to kind of say that it took me a few listens to actually get into this album. Not that it was anything different, but as far as the songwriting, I'm going to definitely quote some of Dan Watson's quotes of his from his interview with, of course, Matthias Matter of High Roller Records that he did. I'm going to quote some stuff from there because it definitely has some ties to some of the songs on this album. But as far as that, the writing is definitely different. It should also be noted that Bart Gabriel, who of course is the owner of Skull Records, mastered and produced this album for Hexx. And they definitely comment that it's a much better produced album compared to Wrath of the Reaper. I always kind of thought that to me when listening to this, I'm thinking this album just sounds a little similar to Wrath of the Reaper. For some reason, the production doesn't sound too different from there. So apparently, I guess there is some differences. I don't know. If it wasn't pointed out, I wouldn't really be pointing out Bart Gabriel's at least his hand in the writing of this album, and which he also has some writing in the album. He actually helped out with also writing some of the songs on the record, which probably given for why the song Entangled In Sin's got some interesting lyrics, and I'll definitely will a little bit kind of elaborate on that. And still, though, it took me a few listens to get in this record, but eventually I got into it. And I think that this is a good album to begin with. So, to try and get into it, I'm just going to go through at least the positives of this album. I'm going to try and get to some of the positives. I think there's some good songs on this album, and I'm going to definitely just run down some of the songs I really dig off this album. First highlight is, of course, the opener, which is Watching Me Burn. Again, it just opens up the album, and it just rolls in like a tank in the battlefield. It's just a freaking great way to open up the album, and definitely, again, it gives you a lot of hope for that the album is going to be just, again, very pounding. I know that there's some pretty good response. I'm not going to try and make this that I don't like the album. So don't try and at least think that I'm not liking the album. It's a good record. So this is a good way to start the album. And again, from there on, we follow up with, of course, with the title track. Again, this is a good track, though. It is very good, but it has some interesting choice lyrics. I'm going to get it there. I think the one, if I could try and perfectly quote this, apparently it could deal, I don't know if it deals with neglect. I have no clue, but all of it and the thing that threw me off, this one line in the lyric just fucking threw me off for a bit, and I actually kind of laughed a little bit at this lyric. Not that I'm in a mean way, but just one of those that just took me by surprise to even hear some of these lyrics in this at least a track from Hexx, because I expect this kind of stuff from at least maybe, I don't know, Manowar, I don't know, or I don't know, maybe the Mentors for some reason. But it's, my daddy was a preacher. I guess his mommy at least left him or something like that. I know I'm butchering some of it. His mommy left him. He was smoking, drinking, and jerking off the porn. And I was entangled in sin ever since. Or I was something like that. I butchered some of that. Still though, it's the part that where it's like, he is smoking, he's drinking, jerking off the porn. I'm like, what the fuck is this? I have no clue what in the hell. That's where I'm like, you listen to at least pay attention to some of the lyrics. I don't know, this could have been written by Bart Gabriel for all I know. This could have been. It's like, and it just took me by surprise, and at first, it took me a while to really kind of get into it, but the thing is, I am so sorry, but I just can't take a track completely serious if you're going to add in lyrics, some of that kind of stuff, okay? I do not expect me to at least get behind lyrics by that. I mean, I expect that from goofier kind of bands, but Hexx, for a band who's kind of been a little serious in some aspects, some of that just, for some reason, it just throws me off. So I'm wondering if this is a part of, if it's, I don't know, part of neglect. If it's a song about neglection, I have no clue, but it just completely threw me off. And I don't know whether or not if I actually am supposed to take this serious or I'm not supposed to. I'm sorry if I'm starting to come off like, I don't know, fucking Roger Ebert. But shit like that, I don't know. It's completely ridiculous to me. I apologize, but it's just absolutely ridiculous to me. So let's just move on to, at least it's a good track nonetheless with a great riff. But that fucking lyric where, again, smoking, drinking, jerking off the porn, I don't know what the fuck I'm supposed to think. God damn it. Still though, it's not a bad track nonetheless, but I don't know. The interesting lyric is what throws me off, and it still has a way of throwing me off. Still, though, it's not a bad track nonetheless. Again, if you're gonna rip me apart for some of that, go ahead and rip me off. I don't care. For fuck's sake. So, though, let's definitely move on. Another great track that I dig off the album is Vultures Gather Round, which, again, this is a smoking barn burner. Great freaking track. It's a great track, nonetheless. Power Mad, this track just fires away. It's a good song, though this one also has some interesting lyrics too. Almost on par with some of the lyrics in Entangled In Sin, though a little bit kind of creepy for some reason. Just kind of a little bit kind of creepy in my opinion, from what I've actually kind of at least paid attention to at least the mixing of the album. And yes, I know Dan Watson has said that this was at least a better produced album, but there are parts where I think Eddie Vega gets lost at least here and there in the mixing of the album. I don't think he was that lost in the mix on the previous record. That's just my honest opinion when listening to the album. But I digress. So let's definitely move on. Infernal Enemy, this is a twisted steamroller of a track. It's absolutely twisted, and it's a freaking great track too. Definitely one of the best songs on the album. Another interesting one on the album is, of course, Touch of the Creature. Again, this is another fiery speed burner, but it's also so freaking catchy. This I hear is definitely one of the more catchier songs on the album, or at least one of the ones that tries to invoke more catchier kind of at least vibes to it. I think that this is probably one of the best of at least the bunch when it comes to that. It's a great track. So Touch of the Creature is definitely for sure a highlight of the album. Why To the Way of the World? This is a interesting one on the other hand. This is definitely pretty cool. It's kind of slow, but not too much. But it definitely has a cool vibe. But this track, on the other hand, it just spits venom. This is definitely, I think, one of the perfect of at least the ones where it actually has a pretty good meaning behind it, in my opinion. This one definitely a very thought-provoking, which I'll eventually will talk about Beautiful Lies here and quote Dan Watson on that one. But this definitely it's got a more, again, a very interesting message to it, and I think it is probably one of the better messages on the album. It for sure definitely, again, the best way, again, to describe it is they're just spitting venom with this song. It's a great track, and it works. So I think the last of the good highlights for me on the album is the very last track, which is Over But the Bleeding. It's another great track, and again, it just closes the album out, but it's a slow, yet calm, moody, yet heavy song, and it's a great way to end the album. I think in many ways, this is probably the perfect way you probably would end the record anyways. But again, so that's why if you got the vinyl record, this is a pretty good ending to the album. So there you go. Overall, with these 10 songs, they're pretty good. So let's definitely kind of move on. Now, those are at least some of my positives. I know that there are some negatives in there, but those are at least some of my positives on there. Now, as far as when it comes to songs I didn't really talk about, that's Beautiful Lies. Not that I don't think this is a bad song, but I don't know if this is really the best song on the album, in my opinion. And the thing is, why I will say that is because of when reading the interview between Matthias Mattis, with the guy of Hollow Records, with, of course, Dan Watson. Dan Watson definitely seems to be very positive. I'm going to quote Dan Watson here. I'm going to quote him. When I was writing Beautiful Lies, again, explains Dan Watson, my thoughts was if Hexx had a radio-friendly MTV video hit back in the mid-1980s, what would it sound like? That's where the catchy chorus comes from. The lyrical content is more socially relevant today, I think, than it would have been in the 80s. The song reflects on how the beliefs of the masses are suspiciously exactly what we want to hear coming from either our governments or our religions, and may not necessarily be the truth. It is designed to get the listener to consider examining their beliefs and to have the courage to question everything at least asserted by the government and religion. I get his point there, but to be quite honest, for a track that I feel is kind of ordinary on the album to begin with, it's not a bad song. Again, there's a little bit, it's definitely his idea of trying to come up with a very MTV style hit. It does hit some of that points, but I think in some ways, I feel it gets lost here and there. And I don't think it's really the strongest song on the album. And again, I think the best of his, political commentary, I think is better on Wise to the Ways of the World than it is on Beautiful Lies here. So that's just my honest opinion. It's not a bad song by any means, but for at least a song, for his opinion on and his, again, just his personal views, and him feeling that this is at least a very catchy track, I think in some of it, I feel like I feel whatever he's trying to get at, I feel gets a little bit lost there. And that's the way I feel towards the track. It's not a bad song, but it's not really the best song on the album, in my honest opinion. Still, though, that's at least some of the original songs. Again, there's some other decent songs. Again, like Infernal Enemy, Strive the Grave. Again, they're okay songs, but they're not really amazing to begin with. So, I mean, there's some really good songs on this album, but there's also some I just feel like, But now let me definitely comment on some of the bonus tracks. Okay, I think of the three bonus tracks, I think the one that does most for me, and that could have been on the album, it really could have been, is Signal 30, Interstate 5. Now, let me definitely comment on this song, Interstate 30, 1-5. And I'm going to be quoting most of Dan Watson from his interview with Matthias Matter on High Roller Records. So here it is. Signal 30 is an old California highway patrol radio code used in the 1950s and 1960s for a highway fatality. Dan Watson shed some light on the question. Interstate, or I-5, is short for Interstate 5, that connects San Francisco to Los Angeles and runs up California and through the state of Oregon and Washington in the United States. They also made a driver's education film of the same name. It was aimed at new drivers as a means to stress the dangers and responsibilities of driving a motor vehicle. They showed actual footage filmed at the scenes of fatal auto accidents. Very bloody and gory. Years ago, I bought a DVD called Hell's Highways, and it contained most of the early driver's training films, including Signal 30. The video also contained a lot of unedited color footage from the 1950s of fatal auto accidents in California. This was back before seat belts were mandatory, and the cars Detroit was churning out were made of much thicker steel. Even the dashboards were made of steel, and safety glass was not yet common. And 10 years later, I was driving back to the Bay Area on I-5 from Los Angeles with the bass player from the Hellbillies. I believe it's one of Dan Watson's other bands. After spending the weekend mixing the new Hellbillies album, Bloody Trilogy, Volume 2, when we came upon a grisly auto accident, a car had tried to pass other vehicles on the 4-lane highway and clipped the cement base of an overpass. The vehicle had spun out of control and collided with several other motorists, resulting in multiple fatalities. Bodies were scattered all over the place, all over the interstate. Most families returning from the Bay Area on the long holiday weekend, it was horrific. I had never seen men, women, and children's bodies severed and ripped apart like that, up that close. Most were killed on impact, but some were still dying or at least clinging to life. I will never forget the look on one little girl's eyes as we slowly by the scene. She had been torn in half from the waist and she was still alive. There was nothing anyone could do. It made a lasting impression on me. I am now a much more cautious driver, and I wrote the song Signal 30 Interstate 5 not only to remember those who were unfortunate enough to lose their lives in the auto accidents, but also as a reminder that life is a very fragile and may be taken away at any moment. So, and it's interesting that he was able to kind of write a track based off of that. And again, it's actually gut-wrenching shit right there. It's absolutely gut-wrenching. It is, but that's what the song is inspired by, and there is some of that feel. You do get some of that. It's a very dark, heavy track. And it's very interesting. If that could have been on the action album, I think it would have been fine. I think it definitely wouldn't have hurt the album to begin with. So it's a pretty good track, nonetheless. Of course, as far as my comments on the re-recording songs of Night of Pain and Terror, well, then that's what they just are just re-recording with, of course, the newer lineup and with Eddie Vega singing, and there's really nothing much else I can add there, so that's about it. So there you go, there is my review for, of course, Entangled In Sin from Hexx. Again, as far as my rating, it's a 8.95 out of 10. It's a okay record, basically. That's why I know he's been positive. He says it's a much better record than Wrath of the Reaper, but in my opinion, I feel like I don't think it's nearly as good as Wrath of the Reaper. But this is still a good record nonetheless. So with that, this album, of course, has been out since September 25th. I definitely want to know, what were your thoughts on this album? Do you think it's a better album than Wrath of the Reaper? If not, let me know in the comment section below. And of course, if you haven't heard this album, again, it's a good record nonetheless. I do think it's worthy of checking out. So with that, I hope you all enjoyed. This is Every Thrasher Sam out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.